Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Control Port Podcast, episode 324. I'm Benjamin Yoder, here today, talk to you about video games. We're going to talk this week about some dogs of Bay. Not about the game itself. We'll get into it. We'll talk about it, though. We got some, I guess, potentially bad Xbox news, depending on how you look at it. There's kind of different ways you can look at it. And then also just some tiny games. Dragon Quest Champions update. Dragon Quest Champions sales figures update. I've been neglecting you guys for weeks now. We're back. We got some news in that regard. And then, assuming I don't chicken out on you, I'm going to do a little quick rundown of Dragon Marked for Death at the end of the podcast. I recently replayed it with some friends in a 4-player experience on PlayStation 4. So we did play Dragon Quest Marked for Death many years ago at this point, and I'm sure I talked about it on the podcast. But I thought it'd be worth revisiting and talking about a little bit about it, especially because I don't remember if I ever really did a full rundown beyond a very long, I think, what did I call them? Quick plays? I think it's the last quick play I ever did was for Dragon Marked for Death, which you don't know is an old feature where I basically just showed a game, played it, and then talked over it. It's basically a ripoff of Giant Bomb's Quick Looks. But there was a lot of problems I had with that I just eventually kind of gave up on it because there's a lot of games that didn't really fit that format very well, and I wasn't pleased with it. I don't remember how the Dragon Marked for Death one went, but it was the last one I did at the very least. But I think it was a pretty big gap. Anyways, all that aside, video game time. Let's talk about it. Dog of Bay, as I mentioned before. This is a game I actually talked about last week briefly, but I did not tell you what it was because I was not allowed to tell you what it was at that time. So if you did not know, Dog of Bay is a new fan translation, or rather it's an old PS2 game, but it got a new fan translation from Hilltop. If you don't know, previously, double if you don't know, previously I did some playtesting for Hilltop for Blue Legend of Water. And I did a little video for that kind of thing. But it was a very casual, I think it was a podcast highlight actually. So it was I talked about it on the podcast, made a video out of it, that kind of thing. So Dog of Bay was another project in that line. Much less text, much shorter game as well. It's only about maybe an hour or two. You could probably, I think you could definitely beat it in an hour. But yeah, I was asked to help playtest that, so I went ahead and started playtesting it, and at the time when I was playtesting it, there wasn't much English in the game. I mean, there was the character viewer, but I hadn't gotten to that point yet, so the majority of the game I played was just entirely in Japanese, which, again, not much in there, and I ended up just, really liking it, and there's a lot of things about Dog of Bay that I did not realize it at the time, but kind of fit into a video I was already trying to make. I was trying to make a video about the bourbon metaverse, which was really dumb. There's no good reason why. I won't go deep into it, but the bourbon metaverse is a bourbon snack company metaverse that was created. And it didn't really make any sense for me to make a video about it. Thankfully, this game kind of came along and saved me from that video. And so it's basically a video that's just kind of about how, hey, when I was a kid, I saw the X-Play segment on Dog of Bay. And they were definitely hey, here's this weird Japanese furry game. And I was playing this game. And I was like, this game's not weird. It's very, I don't know. It's a very sincere game, I feel in a lot of ways. And, I think it's a good opportunity for me to say, hey, look, Ben, when he was 12, pointed and laughed at this game, thought it was silly. And then, there was no point in my life I really thought about playing Dog of Bay again. I guess I wouldn't be opposed to it, but, there wasn't any reason. I mean, even when I was asked to do playtesting, I was kind of oh, okay, sure, I guess. But yeah, it was just nice to sit down and be oh, this is actually a really cute game in a lot of ways, despite how everyone presents it. And that's the thing. Everyone's when it got announced, the news stories oh, the bizarre PS2 dog rhythm game, when it's really not that weird. So anyways, I was really happy to get that video out. So if you did not see that video, that is up on the main YouTube channel. That is a scripted video. Came together very quickly, about less than a week. But I think it generally turned out pretty good. I also posted a postmortem over on my Ko-fi, and it's also on the website as well. If you don't know, my Ko-fi posts I also post on my main website, but I don't really advertise it there because I don't think anybody comes to my website. I go to my website, I'm pretty sure. I briefly turned on tracking just to be curious about the numbers, but then I ended up breaking something on my website, so I ended up turning it back off. So I have no idea how many people are coming to my website, but it's fine. I'm pretty sure it is just me. So anyways, those are up and out. So that was cool, cute. please watch that video. I think it was really fun. And yeah, I'm really happy I got to participate in another fan translation. It's one of those things that like I feel bad because like in the case of Blue, like, you know, Blue is a game I had and I was like, okay, I did not have Dagobah. I did buy a copy of Dagobah after I beat it. And like, it was pretty cheap, so I just went and imported it. But Blue was like a game that I played and like, yeah, it was fine. I had Blue. I was like, eventually I'd like to play this game, so hey, why not in a fan translation concept, situation. But like, I couldn't really think of a video to make around it. I mean, I like the idea around it being like a cute kind of like take your daughter to work day kind of game in a lot of ways. I thought that aspect of it was really fun. The rest of the game, I have more feelings for Blueport J. So like it was just kind of hard for me to get like really excited for Blue. But you know, Blueport J is a whole other thing. Blueport J, I think the reason why, okay, Blueport J, I'm pretty sure anybody listening to this point already knows what Blueport J is, but if you don't know, it is like a diving adventure game kind of thing, but you're like on this little island and you're a bunch of girls that are on a summer holiday kind of thing. And like the island's going to get like, you know, basically developed on. So like in the course of this adventure of the summer vacation, you basically save the island, even though they didn't really intend to. It's really fun. It's really like cute overall. And it's got this really relaxing vibe while you kind of explore the island, but then, you know, you go underwater and it's like, again, also very relaxing until you start running out of air and things like that. There's a lot to love about Blueport J. It's just the fact that like it is made by a guy who is, you know, turned on by girls drowning, which makes it very difficult to talk about. But if you take that that context away, it's a very fun, cute game in a lot of ways, and I kind of prefer that game over Blue overall. So I think it was like hard for me to get excited for it, but you know, it's just you never know. Like I never know what games are gonna make me want to make videos. It's just like really hard. That was a problem with Gun Gauge a long time ago as well. It was like I'm gonna make a Gun Gauge video, but did not play Gun Gauge. Then it was like, oh, I don't even like Gun Gauge very much. Like it's a cute game. I mean, cute. Stylish game maybe, but like I don't like it that much. So when people were like, I don't know, when people were like, oh, you're the Gun Gauge guy, I'm like, no, I'm not the Gun Gauge guy. Anyways, all that stuff aside, one thing that I did have to do in the context of this game though, which is actually kind of interesting. So I have the PS2 MC2SIO memory card adapter. So basically it's a SD card memory card adapter thing. You can plug it into the PS2 and you can run games off your PS2 memory card. I am aware at this point that that is not a super compatible thing with a lot of games. There are some problems with it, but I didn't really, I mean, I kind of knew at the time, I just didn't like think too much of it otherwise though, right? So I ended up picking it up, tried to play Dagobah on it. Dagobah did not like it. so immediately was like, okay, I just told people I needed to test this thing. So here, how do I get something up and running? And I knew you could get games running on the PS2 over a network, which sounds like black magic, honestly. But I got that all set up and it was actually like way easy. But, you know, it makes sense because the Ethernet port can deliver speeds much faster than like a DVD or CD drive can or whatever. But like the idea that you're like running a video game off your hard drive on your PC over a network, like over your like your router or whatever, modem router, yeah, router, and then into your PS2 is just like a very bizarre thing. So, I mean, it's all wired and everything, so it's like the transfer speed should be fine. But that was way easier than I thought to set that up. It only took me about 40 minutes, and then it was good. So, yeah, I mean, if you've got a setup where you're wired up and everything in your house and you can, you know, do what you need to do with your IP addresses and things like that, if you're an adult like me and own your own internet here, right? Then I just highly recommend just doing that over probably buying anything. It just works really easy and really well. But it was interesting to try to figure that stuff out. So we're going to get into some news here first, and then we'll go to Jillian's, and then we will talk about Dragon Marked for Death. But speaking of needing to hack your systems to do what you got to do for video games, Microsoft announced that the Xbox 360 storefront will be closing next year. I think it's July next year. So if you don't know, all these online consoles, they have online stores, and then eventually they have to shut down. Wii is a big one. Wii U, or recently, the Wii U and 3DS eShop, things like that. Sony shut down the PSP one. They were going to shut down the PS Vita and PS3 one, but they didn't yet. I'm sure that's going to be coming soon for PS3 at the very least. I think the bigger problem with Sony's situation is, they got kind of mixed up with this whole issue with like games not functioning properly without certain online connections. But also, I think they just didn't give enough heads up, where Microsoft is giving you the full, 1 year heads up on this. They're also saying that, all your games are still going to be downloadable at this point, so it's not like they're shutting it down. Nintendo does similar things. They're like, you can't buy after this amount of time, but you can still download things until this date. Or I think in some cases they might still let you. I feel like the Wii one was up way longer than it should have been, probably. But this does not include any 360 content that is backwards compatible on the Xbox One or Xbox Series consoles. So, it's basically only things that you're buying through an Xbox 360. So, I saw, some people doing their thing about this, getting kind of upset, but I think it's just the nature and reality. And at this point, we're just at the point where we are living with the reality that this is how these things work, right? I did see I forget who it was. There's someone who I saw made a comment of just like, hey, don't go buy a bunch of games. You're basically reporting people for shutting these platforms down, because if you don't know, sometimes they'll see a jump in revenue in the last month because a bunch of people go and buy some stuff, right? Which I don't really know how I feel about that specifically, like trying to punish them by not buying anything. But my stance, I've said on this podcast many times before, is, if these companies it's not worth their time and money to sell you something, then it's, in my opinion, not worth your time and money to jump through hoops to get something. Now, I think in the case of like 360, things are going to still be downloadable for a while, but I think the big thing is like, are you going to play it soon, right? There are many, many, many WiiWare games, Xbox indie games on the Xbox 360 that I bought. PlayStation mobile games, and like there's things on these platforms I have bought that I like kind of planted my flag for, and then never really got to, right? And I kind of like, obviously for right now at least, that stuff is still there, but when that system dies and that is gone, right? It'll be like, what was kind of the purpose of it, right? So I think that's my general feeling on this kind of stuff anyway. So anyways, I have never once thought really, about modifying my Xbox 360. I mean, I guess briefly for, some important stuff. Like I think like my copy of Dream Clean Club, the 13 teen rated version of Dream C Club. No, Dream C Club 0, I think is what I have. I think that is region locked, so that was something that I did briefly consider, I think, at one point for doing something with my Xbox 360 in terms of soft modding. But I have not looked into that to see what that entails, but it is time. It looks like it is time for me to look into that. Maybe not this year, but next year. That will probably make sense. So, I mean, the reality is like I don't really know what I'll be doing with my 360 anytime in the near future, but. Anyways, there's some sites going around that were recommending some games and stuff like that. Apparently that baseball game Suda put out is like related to No More Heroes. I mean, I think there's a connection in Travis Strikes Again specifically. I don't know for sure, but it's like a Kinect-based baseball game. But I was looking at one Japanese website, which I thought was kind of funny, because they're like, here are 2 recommended Xbox 360 games you should go buy and download. And one was Otomedius X, I believe, which makes sense, shooter. People like it. And the other one was Dragon's Lair Connect Edition, which is interesting. I did not know that existed, but they spoke very highly of it in their text. I forget if this is 4Gamer or what, or Inside Games or whatever, but I was just like, this is interesting that this is what they're recommending. But I think that's cool. I think, put something like that out there. I had no idea that thing existed, so yeah. Just, do what you gotta do. Just keep, keep in mind, this is the reality of all these storefronts. They'll eventually shut down. So I just personally on the mind, I've done the thing where I spend hundreds of dollars when a system shuts down. And I just don't think it's like worth my money and effort a lot of times. So I just personally think probably you should avoid that as well. But if you want to buy something and play something now, though, go for it. Like, I'm always a big supporter of like just if it's available and officially available for you to buy and purchase, just go ahead and do it, right? And just support it, kind of thing. But I'm not going to sit there and tell you what you do with your life, right? Everyone's going to have their own lines there, and like I have some weird lines with like subscription services where like I don't really want to pay for subscription services to play games, so often I'll just go around that as well. So we all draw our own lines in the sand when it comes to this. So do what makes you happy. We haven't talked about a Kemco game in a long time. I think there's like a Golf Story game was the last time we brought up Kemco. I wanted to bring up Kemco for 2 games this week, mostly for Chrome Wolf though. Kemco's Chrome Wolf as like this, look, it's a Kemco looking JRPG. It is like RPG Maker looking kind of thing, but it was kind of nice because it has a very like Valkyria Chronicles-esque looking aesthetics with like, basically everyone using, military equipment and tanks. And initially I was like, it's kind of like Metal Max is what I initially thought, but nah, it actually looks more like Valkyria Chronicles. But yeah, just kind of like this, kind of modern military RPG kind of thing, which I think is kind of neat. I feel like modern military RPG stuff is still kind of rare, weirdly enough. I don't know why. What is that game like is it called Operation Wolf on Xbox 360? There's like one strategy RPG that's like a modern day Japanese RPG or strategy RPG that is like, I think like a what if, or maybe it's set in World War II or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember the name of it. It was a cool game though. Anyways, I just like the look of this game. So I just wanted to bring that up. The other one I wanted to mention, which I probably wouldn't have mentioned this if it was not for Chrome Wolf, but they also announced a game. I don't know, maybe these have been around for a while. Again, when I find out about them is how this podcast goes. But they talked about Cross Tales, or showed a trailer for Cross Tales, which is basically like a Final Fantasy Tactics style game, but with a bunch of cat people. Mostly just like people with cat ears, I should say. It's not really cat people. It's not like Soul Torobo or Cat of Bay, something like that. But it has a very like PS2 game aesthetic to it. So, I'm not super up and up on Kemco. I know they've had some games that use 3D models and things like that, but this one just was the first one I've seen them make a game that looks like a PS2 strategy RPG. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm going to have links for both of those in the description. One is to the Steam page. The other one looks like it's to the YouTube URL for Cross Tales or whatever. So either way, you can figure that out where that is if you go look at the description. Dragon Quest Champions. Before we get into the sales talk, I did want to mention that Dragon Quest Champions is actually getting a new map. They added a snow map to it, which actually feels like really fast turnaround for like a battle royale game. I mean, I could be wrong. I might be like so out of the loop of what battle royales do now, but I feel like battle royales typically stick with one map for a long time before they introduce a new one. So pretty quick for them to just throw out another map here in a month or so after release kind of thing, right? I don't really know anything about the map otherwise, if it has any unique gimmicks or anything like that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a snowstorm element to it or something like that. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. Don't know if I'll play it. We'll see. But Dragon Quest Champions, at the end of July, fell off the top 50 chart in Japan. So we'll see. We'll see. Maybe it can climb its way back up. And, that doesn't mean it's not making money, baby, right? Just means it's not in the top 50. So we'll see. I haven't seen anything all of August, basically. I didn't really keep track of it. Like, sometimes I'll just go through my news stories. If I don't happen to open up the weekly mobile game reporting, I won't actually see it. But this was the first week I really went on my way to go find it. Because, like, it's been a few weeks since we talked about that. What's been going on? Like, oh, Dragon Quest Champions, gone from that list. So we'll see. If you don't remember, there's actually like a pretty significant chunk of Square Enix's mobile game revenue in the month that it came out. So, we'll see how it goes. And if it comes back up, a lot of games seem to kind of come and go from that list. And some of those games are very successful games. So I don't want to sit there and say that this is a bad sign in the sense of that, like, Dragon Quest Champions, not being successful. But it did definitely seem to lose its launch luster, maybe. I don't know. But anyways, Dragon Quest Champions, we wish you the best. Fare thee well. I'll check it on the chart again at some point and see if it shows back up. Anyways, and the last game I want to talk about before we go to Jillian's Corner is Blast Blue Entropy Effect. This is a kind of like a 2D roguelike kind of game. I can't tell if it's like Chinese or Korean. I'm so terrible when it comes to Chinese and Korean spoken dialogue. Text, easy enough. Korean text, you can tell, a bunch of round characters and stuff like that. But like hearing Korean versus Chinese is very hard for me. I just have not listened to enough of it to be able to tell the difference, unfortunately. Japanese, super easy, obviously. So I like when someone's like can't tell the difference between Japanese, Chinese, and Korean, I'm kind of sympathetic because I cannot tell the difference between Korean and Chinese. But anyways, I don't know if it's Korean or Chinese developer, but it was all that voice acting in that language kind of thing. So I don't know. I don't know. There's like, it kind of looks cool. I like the look of it. I mean, I'm always kind of a fan of them taking fighting game characters and trying to do other things with them that aren't just fighting games, right? Like as successful as not successful as I think it traditionally has been. It is kind of nice to see developers kind of like break out of the mold of what they're currently doing and say, hey, what if we're making like a roguelike? But apparently it's like, I don't know if this is like initially like a fan game or something, but it seems like it may have existed in some form before. But now it's officially licensed and available. I think you can buy it in early access right now. I think there's like 4 stages or something like that, and then like a randomized level as well. So I don't know how many characters it has or whatever, but I just thought it looked neat. I have not played a roguelike / light, or at least something that I have identified really as such. Nintendoji, I guess, maybe is one thing. I'm going to stress here. I still don't really understand the difference between roguelike and roguelite. It's just like, it's a genre I don't interact with nearly enough to know, right? Sit there and you can go, yeah. It's like part of why I don't complain about people getting like dating sims and romantic adventure games mixed up. Because like, I don't even know what a roguelike is. So it's just what matters to us, right? Anyways, but I think like a Getsu Fumiden is probably the more likely game I would try in that style, honestly. But still, I think the game like visually looked really nice and it looked like it played well as well. So looks neat. We are here at Jillian's Corner doing the Jillian thing. Jillian supports us on Ko-fi. Thank you, Jillian, for your ongoing monthly support to us. Jillian asks a question. How many Final Fantasies is too many? In parentheses puts joke, but I'm going to take this question seriously because I don't know how to respond to a joke question. Other than, I don't know. Like, I mean, like, I think you could just throw any number and be like, that's a silly number on there. I mean, like 16 already feels kind of silly. But I mean, I think the only thing I will really say is that, like, in a lot of ways, there is no too many Final Fantasies, I feel like, in terms of numbering. If anything, it is probably one of the most like refreshing things in a Final Fantasy to get one with a big number at the end, right? Like, I think that's like one of the things that's like really interesting about Final Fantasy is that like the mainline games are all immensely different from each other. It's the ones that are like based around the same numbered games is where it gets like kind of, messy, right? And like that starts getting into like, oh, these games can kind of feel similar and things like that. But I mean, Square Enix, I think traditionally has had a good track record of keeping most Final Fantasies feeling different, right? In one way or another. So in a lot of ways, I think there is no too many Final Fantasies. I think the fact that they're able to change that world, the play style, the setting, the themes, all that stuff, they obviously they have the core of like crystals and things like that, and you have chocobos and mogs and stuff like that, but Final Fantasy can kind of be whatever, right? Does that mean I'll be excited for every Final Fantasy? No. I mean, I'm not excited really to play Final Fantasy 16. It looks fine. I don't really want a Devil May Cry style Final Fantasy, but I'm sure it's a fine video game. I'm sure it plays well. I'm sure it will feel good to play. It's just, I don't know. I mean, Final Fantasy is not the most complicated RPG series already, right? So, if you look at like what was going on with Final Fantasy 15, make it into a more traditional action RPG, I think makes a lot of sense generally, at least when it comes to Noctis's play style. Look, all I'm saying is that we need to have a Final Fantasy shooter as a mainline Final Fantasy. Anyways, I think it's like neat that Final Fantasy can do that. And I think as much as I do not care about Final Fantasy 16, I'm just glad there's something. I think maybe the one thing I don't like, I kind of just wish Final Fantasy 16 did did differently was I wish it just wasn't like medieval fantasy kind of thing. Obviously, it's been a long time since they have a mainline medieval fantasy, Final Fantasy or whatever. And obviously, it has a much darker tone than any previous medieval fantasy, Final Fantasy, right? So it's like, it's different. It's different. But on the surface level, it's just not very exciting to look at. It just kind of looks like the thing. And I think that's like one of the things about like Final Fantasy 13 that's super strong is that like every area you go to, I feel like, or at least a lot of the areas you go to feel like visually just incredibly distinct. So I don't know. I haven't played 16 yet. I'm not going to complain about it too much as somebody who has not played it. Thank you, Jillian, for your question. I appreciate it. If you want to ask some questions, you can ask me on Ko-fi if you want. I have always had weird rules around asking questions, but you know, probably just makes sense just to ask me on Ko-fi if you want to ask me anything or whatever. Do what you want. There's no unique content on Ko-fi, although I did include like a mention on the Dogga Bay video for anybody who's donated in the last like year or so. I'll probably just kind of do that mention based off like who donated between the videos. So like, you know, if like say Jillian is our only supporter until the next video, Jillian will be the only one who gets mentioned in the next video. So we'll see how that goes, I guess. I don't know. You know me. I change my mind all the time, especially about stuff that's like not like, you know, not being looked at to any depth. I'm just like, whatever. I'm just going to change how I do the Ko-fi. So that's how it goes. Anyways, thank you again, Jillian. All right, as promised for many, many weeks and months now, maybe at this point, I was going to do a little Dragon Marked for Dead, little walkthrough here, you know, just in case you didn't hear me talk about it before. And I recently, you know, kind of got it refreshed in my mind. But Dragon Marked for Death, yeah, it's a kind of like a, I guess you could say 2D quest grinding thing. Like it has kind of like a Monster Hunter formula to it where you go to the quest counter and then you go send out on a quest kind of thing, but it feels maybe a little bit more like where the journey is more important than the ending kind of thing, right? So like Monster Hunter games, you're always trying to just get to the big monster at the end, but Dragon Marked for Death, you're doing various quests and things like that have you going around collecting items, killing certain monsters, completing certain objectives. So there's definitely a lot of like quest variety in terms of like what objectives they're having you do. You're not just killing, you know, one big monster over and over and over again kind of thing. But like when I initially saw Dragon Marked for Death, what like really excited me about it is that it is probably the closest we ever have had a game that looks like a multiplayer Castlevania game. I was super excited with Castlevania Portrait of Ruin when they had multiplayer in there, only to find out when I played the game that the multiplayer is like a 5-room like rush, not even a boss rush. It's just like kill a bunch of enemies, the same enemies every time, no variation, and then fight a boss and like you do it with another player. And it just really was not. It felt like more like a proof of concept online thing rather than an actual, you know, video game. And I've always kind of hoped that, you know, games like Bloodstained, Curse of the or Ritual of the Moon and things like that would eventually add in some kind of like co-op online multiplayer thing in a Metroidvania style. So I'm sure there's some indie game out there, but at this moment, like none of those games have passed in front of me. So Dragon Marked for Death is the closest thing I have. But, you know, because it is an Inti Creates game specifically, you know, who's worked on Mighty Number 9, Gunvolt, and things like that, they have their, you know, nice gimmick in here where each character they kind of develop has kind of a unique moveset in a way that I always kind of describe, you know, it's always hard to say this, but like describe it as every part of a character feels like it is melded into how that character moves, maybe is the way to put it. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but we're going to do that right now. And I really like that about Gunvolt. I like that about Mighty Number 9. And in the case of Dragon Marked for Death, that is somewhat true for most characters, but the important thing is that every character is fairly distinct, right? So previously I had played as Empress, which is kind of like the traditional kind of all-arounder, damage dealer, is fast-paced, one-handed sword kind of thing. She has like a dragon arm that she can shoot projectile energy with kind of thing, depending on the element you're at. And then I've also played as the warrior, which I don't like the warrior as much, but he has this big shield kind of thing that you can do, things like that, so you can kind of tank. And then this time, previously that was on the Switch, this time on PlayStation 4, I played as the wizard, which is pretty neat because essentially the wizard has this play style where you put in like a ton of inputs, and then each part of those inputs make up a different part of a spell. Some of them are more simple, like if you just want to cast fire, you just press the same, face button on the controller over and over again. Let's say square. I don't know if that's accurate, but we'll say square on the PS4 controller. And you do that 4 times and you have a fire spell, right? But it's a level 1 fire spell. So what can you do with that? You can also do things like power up the spell. So that includes doing like X triangle, X triangle, X triangle to basically power up the spell. And so it becomes level 2 or level 3, depending on what kind of modifiers you have set. And then you can keep doing that until it's at its maximum level, essentially. But there's also the ability to like modify spells to be a condensed spell, which basically just means that the spell becomes a kind of one, not always, but most of the time, like a one big hit kind of spell where it's like, we're going to shoot this big ice block and it's going to just do a ton of damage if you hit the enemy kind of thing. But then you also have like things like the homing spell, and that can be combined with elements as well. So you get like a bunch of little ice crystals that chase after the enemies and things like stuff. So it's a really interesting class because you have to like in the heat of the moment during boss fights and things like that, cast out these spells that can sometimes take, 20, 30 inputs, right, to do. And you have to do them right or else the entire spell fails. And you have to start over kind of thing. So it's a really challenging kind of thing to do with Wizard. It's a very, very cool class overall. I'm glad I played it, although I did really want to play Oracle and Bandit, but because they are DLC classes, because we restarted on PS4 with my second group that I'm playing with, I did not have access to those, unfortunately. So if you are interested in Oracle and Bandit, Oracle's pretty easy, you just gotta beat the game once. Bandit is like, you gotta get to like a level 50 quest and finish it, so like it takes forever. But, of the original 4 set, Empress, Warrior, Wizard, I think, and Shinobi, which I have not played Shinobi. Somebody else in the group played Shinobi, so I just kind of skipped on that. But I think Empress and the Wizard are great, characters to start with at this game. Or Wizard's hard, but I think it's unique, right? So Empress, good starting character. I think Wizard, just a good, unique character to this game that has its own really interesting gimmicks kind of thing, right? And I think that's pretty cool. And, each of these characters play very differently, but also an interesting thing about them is that they have different, like, elemental stances kind of thing. So you have fire versions of them, ice versions, poison versions, wind, and I don't remember the last one, but there's, like, different elements versions. And depending on the character, those elements can change like how that character plays. Like the warrior has a build that's like, oh, if you are using this element, you're like more of a damage dealing class. So there's like these modifiers that are applied to your skill set that make your character more capable of dealing damage, but less capable of defending other players. Then you get like a more tank build set kind of thing, right? In the case of the wizard, the elemental like stances or whatever you want to call it, like these, you change it in town. So it's not something you can like actively switch between in the mission kind of thing. It's just the ability to do certain spells easier kind of thing. So it doesn't really like change that much about the character. However, even like in the case of like the wizard, each character has 2 weapons, and each of those weapons has different attributes to it and how you actually interact with them. So like the Empress has the like a slashing sword, but it still has like a very stabby sword kind of thing for rapid fire hits. In the case of the wizard, you have a second casting, I forget what it's called, like a focus, I think is what it's called, instead of a book. Your typical casting equipment is like a book, and you can basically use that to cast elemental spells that do a lot of damage. But then you have like a focus that is more focused around buffing and clearing, status ailments and things like that, and casting regen on players and things like that. So like all these characters have a lot of different ways you can kind of, customize them and how they play and find a style that like works really well for you. And that pairs, I think, really well with the fact that this game has very customizable stats and things like that. So, whenever you level up, you can go ahead and assign your points. I think there's like a 50-point cap on each of them, so you can't like put every single point in intelligence or something like that, right, if you want to. But you can kind of prioritize that initially when you're building out your character and things like that. And all the things are easy to kind of switch around, change, and reset if you need to. There's like a currency cost, but it's like fairly minor within the context of the game itself, essentially. So it's got a lot of customization elements to it, which is kind of neat. I played it with 4 people this time. Previously, I played it with just another person. With 4 people, I will say it definitely was a lot more apparent where the faster classes kind of have advantages in kind of the standard level design for Dragon Mark for Death. So like not during boss fights and things like that. So like as a wizard, having to stop and cast or witch. Sorry, witch. I think I've been calling it a wizard this whole time, right? It's a witch. I'm sorry. I think it's witch. Is that right? I don't remember. We're just talking about this video game. The Magic Caster. I'm going to call it one of them. We're just going to stick with it. I'm sorry if it's another one. But it is slow because you have to stop, cast that spell, and then, then you get throw the fire spell kind of thing where the Empress can just like come in and just start smacking stuff and killing it, right? And so it is a little challenging in a multiplayer setting kind of thing. But overall, I do think like the multiplayer setup does work really well. It is nice that you can like continue progress with each other and things like that. And during the boss fights, there's definitely room for every class to shine, I feel like. Every class feels important, at least of the 4 base classes. And each class kind of has their own, like, I think, key strengths that help with certain boss fights and things like that, which I think is really cool overall. But we didn't have a lot of coordination, so like there wasn't too many times where like I only had like a warrior in the group. Each of us were playing one of the 4 classes, and we had a warrior in the group. And like there's definitely times where like it was hard to cast spells. So like he would have the ability to go and like put up a shield and like block me. But unless we were like really on top of things, when things are super hectic, it's really hard to know what somebody wants you to do unless you've pre-coordinated something. So like you would just like do like the Metal Gear Solid thing where you just say, do it. And it's like go over and you like go cast the spell. If you don't know, do it. It's like when I think Snake in Metal Gear Solid says that and like his horse poops or something like that. I don't know. Don't ask me. I've never played Metal Gear Solid 5. But it reminded me a little bit of that. But yeah, I mean, it is basically, you just have to like listen for him and then try to find where he is at on screen and go in there and cast and things like that. And it's always challenging to coordinate in those situations, especially within a 4-person group kind of thing. Cause 4 different people are jumping around doing their own thing kind of thing. So I think it's like a great casual game in that regard. I wouldn't like say you'd ever want to play this game like super, super hard kind of thing and like really try to coordinate and things like that. And I think a big part of why I say that actually has not a lot to do with actually the like character dynamics between each other, but more to do with like the content of the game. So if you don't like know how Dragon Bark for Death works, it's basically like there's enough story quests to get you up to like about level 30. They hide the ending of the game behind these flags, which if you look up a wiki are very easy to find, but in this group this time, they didn't want to look up the flags. They wanted to find them naturally, which was kind of a problem because there's no real hints in the game, unfortunately. So you just kind of gotta go and grind levels and just search around and hope for the best kind of thing. But it's fine. It's just not the ideal. It's like the not the most like time conscious thing to do, I feel like, kind of thing. And it's not like that fun. It's usually just kind of trying to find the one little nook in the level they put in that they have something that like if you talk to the NPC like 3 times, then you get a flag and you're good to go. And then you do that 8 times, across the different levels, and then you can go and fight the final boss fight. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, honestly, but it's fine. It feels like more of a way just to like keep you playing longer than it feels like it makes any real sense kind of thing. But, once you get to the level 30 area, like other than some DLC missions, there's not a lot of new content. And you'll get to the end of the game like pretty dang quick overall. So what the replayability of this game is, which, is not that surprising, is, for action RPGs, especially in this kind of, quest format kind of thing, is that that you have like different scalable versions of quests and things like that, but they're really inconsistent. This game has seen many updates at this point, so I'm guessing certain quests were updated to have more difficulty levels and certain quests weren't. But a lot of quests in the game just have like really big level gaps, so like you can't really like revisit them very often, while other ones have like every 5 levels they'll give you a new quest kind of thing. It's just like a lot of weird inconsistencies like that. And what you'll find is that like a lot of these quests don't give you a ton of EXP, it feels like. So, we're going through grinding through every versions of a quest. You can't skip lower level quests, unfortunately. You have to do the previous level. So if you have like a level 10 quest that has the potential to be level 45 quest, you got to play through every version of that quest until you get up to level 45, which really stinks. But you're doing that, and I think at some point, probably around like level 60, you start finding that like there's just not a lot more to do And so like there are like level 100 boss fights and like this infinite tower, not infinite tower. It's like I forget what it is, like a level 125 goes to level 125 tower or whatever. And like there's this in-game content that just doesn't feel like there's anything between the normal game and the end game. So like around like level 50 or 60, we got in this weird like content desert where it felt like you just kind of had to grind the game nonstop and just try to figure things out essentially, and try to find the best way to grind up levels. And I think we did some calculations on the mission we were doing, and it would have taken us many hours. I think it would have been like probably, we only play like once a week kind of thing. So it probably would have been like a month or so of grinding just to get to where we needed to. And it just didn't make any sense kind of thing. So it just seems like there's like this big like content gap that happens after you finish the game. I'd say both in variety of levels that you're playing, but also just in terms of the difficulty level and things like that. And I think part of the problem with the game is, while there's a lot of customization in how you use your character, a lot of that is not very dependent on what items you get. So there are definitely certain items you'll use because it's the best item you have and things like that, but there's really only like two types of major weapons. So, if you pick up another weapon, you might get one that's like more bent towards using thunder or something like that, but it doesn't really add anything new to the weapon kind of thing, right? It's not like a Phantasy Star Online or something like that where there's tons and tons of different weapons that all play, essentially play the same, but, ultimately feel very different because the pacing of the attack, how they attack, all very different. In the case during Mark for Death, there's just not a lot of that. So it's not very exciting to get gear in the game. And getting gear in the game is kind of a long process as well, and very expensive process in game as well in terms of the in-game currency. So it's really challenging to find motivation, I feel like, once you finish the game, finish the story, to get you to the end game content. It just you start getting around level 50, you're like, there's kind of nothing here, and I'm only halfway to getting to the end game content. And so I think the grind just isn't very fun, unfortunately. So you just kind of, I think you figure out kind of what you like for your character skill set. You kind of decide on that, and then from there, like nothing that you add into your, equipment or something like that will make any real major difference, especially once you get up to that level where you're kind of already, you re-roll your stats and stuff like that. You've played with all the play styles, found the one you like best, things like that. So it's just a lot of things I think that are kind of going against this game in terms of that playability, in terms of like, treating it like a longer term grinding loot game kind of thing. So I still think it's a great multiplayer game. I recommend it to anybody who is like, A, first and foremost, a fan of any creates, but also B, just like is interested in what they got more like 2D, Castlevania style action game can look like in a multiplayer setting. Obviously, it's not exactly like that. It's very linear quests and things like that for the most part. There are some more open-ended ones, but most of them are fairly linear. I think there's a lot of great things about it that I think do really well in that regard. But just, don't expect like a full scale Monster Hunter experience or something like that. And I think as long as you're not like trying to invest, hundreds of hours into this game, I think you'll find a good time at this game, but not necessarily have to really, dedicate your life to it, which I think is great. And it is on like a bunch of platforms now. So it's like a great ways you can play it portably. You can play it on PC. You can play it on PlayStation. I don't know if it's on Xbox, but hopefully it is. But yeah, it's like super accessible for a lot of people. The online, I think, is fairly dead for the most part, though. So if you want to play with multiplayer, you can probably have to organize a group. There's a Dragon Mark for Death Discord group. I have not checked recently to see if they're alive or active at all. So just a heads up on that. But still a very cool game. And yeah, I definitely would recommend it to anybody who's just looking for like a good multiplayer kind of experience, even if you can't really grind it out all the way to the end. So anyways, that's it for this week. Thanks for coming. OneControlPort.com is the website. But yeah, if you didn't watch that Dog of Bay video, go check that out. That's again on the main YouTube channel. I also have the post-mortem up on the Ko-fi and on OneControlPort.com. I have another video script done that I need to edit around still. I haven't actually started that yet, but I'm not rushing that, but I would like to get it done sooner rather than later, so we'll see. But I'm not promising any dates yet because I really don't know what the editing process of that video is going to look like. It's one of those ones where like there's just not a lot of variety to it. So that means it could either be very easy to edit things, or I get like really caught up in these small details of what's on screen, and it will be hard to find what I need to find because a lot of it looks the same. So there's kind of like a double-edged sword there kind of thing. But if it is something that I can just kind of throw something on screen and not have to worry about it, then that's fine. Dog of Bay, super easy. I talked about it on the post-mortem of like how Dog of Bay was helpful in that regard. So just very quick and easy to drop footage down, and you can't really do a lot with a rhythm game that you're using the music for. I feel like you just gotta kind of stick to the song that you're currently listening to and having generally the visuals associated with that song because that matches the pace of the song and things like that. So yeah, so that again, Dog of Bay video is up, but we'll see for other content later when that will be coming. Otherwise, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for coming. OneController.com is the website. If you want to be cool and go to the website, that's where the cool people go. Yeah, so thank you again. You guys have a great week. Bye.